I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a man that vaults gold on two continents. He has 20 years experience in top Fortune 100 FTSE companies in the European Union, or Europe, in Britain. Also, lots of banking experience, just lots of economic experience. I bring it on Egon von Greyerz. Egon, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Greg, it's a great pleasure to be on your program again, and I really always enjoy talking to you, so it'll be fun as usual, I'm sure.
The business name is Matterhorn Asset Management. The website is goldswitzerland.com. And with that, let's move on. Europe, you're in Europe, you're in Switzerland.
Yes, I'm based in Switzerland, in Zurich, absolutely.
And you must get a lot of these.
Part of Europe.
Yeah. Italy is a mess. They're having a big fight with the EU, and they're looking like they're slipping into recession. Germany his last GDP was at negative 0.2%, so they're going backwards. And they have Deutsche Bank, which looks like Deutsche Bank is in free fall at $8.50 a share US, and everybody says they're going to prop it up. That'll come with a great cost. A European Union, Theresa May couldn't look any weaker. I mean, she went to the Neville Chamberlain School of Negotiation. She's in Europe. They won't vote for this. This is a crap sandwich, and they know it is, and you got to help. Anyway, let's talk about the basket case that is Europe, and the reason why a lot of your wealthy clients are vaulting tons, and I do mean tons, of gold. What is going on in Europe, and why am I getting this wrong? It looks bad over there.
It just doesn't look bad. It is bad. And I think, talking about breakfast and Theresa May, I mean, that really tells us of the problems in the whole of Europe. The EU is an artificial organization that, in my view, shouldn't exist, because you have an elite in Brussels, which is unelected and unaccountable, that decides over 500 million people. They are absolutely petrified that Britain is going to get out of the European Union on any acceptable terms. And they have an extremely weak negotiator on the other side, Theresa May, who sometimes I wish it was Donald Trump who negotiated for Britain instead of Theresa May, because he would really tell them what he thinks of them. So they are giving Britain absolutely useless terms, which, as we all know now, have been rejected by the British Parliament and by virtually everyone in the UK. Now, because there are so many countries in addition to Britain that are unhappy with the EU. And you just take, Britain is the first one which is trying to get out, but the EU is holding them, or Brussels is holding them to ransom with unacceptable terms. But you have country after country where there are movements now against what is happening in Europe, and with movements against the EU. And you can take, Italy is the next one, where you have a government that is basically anti-EU, anti the euro, but a country which is bankrupt and right now is dependent on EU money. I mean, they have a debt to GDP of 130%, Italy, but not only that, they are all the time using a system called Target 2. The banks are transferring debts from Italy to Germany via the ECB, and then the Bundesbank and the German banks invest in this Italian debt, and that's now gone up to 500 billion euros. So Italy is in a desperate position, and clearly the country is not going to survive. It would be a lot better for them to get out of the EU, because their currency is much too strong. The euro is much too strong for Italy, is much too strong for Spain, is much too strong for Greece. But of course, the Germans, who are the ones who are really controlling the European Union, they love a weak euro, because the whole of the industrial side and exports in Germany have benefited tremendously from the weak euro. And that is why they're doing everything they can to keep all of these Southern Europeans in the EU, because that's a benefit to them for the currency. So as we know now, we're seeing now leader after leader in Europe weakening. Theresa May has, I think, no support from anyone, and I think it's only a matter of time before either there's a vote of no confidence or she resigns. Macron is having, as we have all seen, major protests. You have the yellow vests who are protesting against fuel tax, etc. France is also, as we know, full of unions that will protest against anything, and that's going to happen next, or certainly in the next year or so, because as the economy weakens, they will protest. And Macron has about, I think, not more than 25% now. His rating has gone down to 25%. So most of the people dislike him intensely, and he's really part of the elite, as he's seen, an ex-banker. And Merkel, of course, is going to resign in a year's time. So you have a weak Europe, but that is really the sign of a weak world economy. We have two forces in the world economy now, Greg. On the one hand, you have these artificial control that the elite is trying to implement or has implemented around the world, which means fake money, fake systems, control of the people, almost like big brother control of the banking system all around the world has to report to everywhere, which was started by the Americans. You have control through taxes. You have control of the markets. You have control of the gold market, of course. So, and not to talk about stock markets. So this control has built up an enormous debt, an enormous system which is getting bigger and bigger. But it's a house of cards, of course, because you cannot control the world by printing money. So against that, you have a system of laws of nature. In the long run, the laws of nature will prevail, and anything that is artificial, and now we have an artificial world in all, every sense of the word artificial, which means that, in my view, in the next few years, we are now turning, markets have gone so far, and that we are now seeing markets around the world turning down, i.e. stock markets have topped, in my view. Whether this starts again in December, it starts next year, we will see a crash in markets, and then a long-term downtrend. That could be a downtrend of several years. The same with the dollar. Dollar is now at the point when in the next few years it will continue its very long-term downtrend. I'll give you just an example. When I started working in Switzerland in the early 70s, there was $1 was 4 Swiss franc 30. Today, $1 is under 1 Swiss franc, so it's about 0.95. So the dollar is in a long-term
lost 75% of its value. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. 75% has gone down.
Cow.
And okay, so Swiss franc has been slightly stronger than other currencies, but it does tell you also, the dollar is only, the Americans have been clever, of course, especially through the petrodollar. The dollar has been the dominant currency for payments, but that's coming to an end now. I see that, in the race to the bottom of the currencies, I see the dollar leading that race. They will all go down to zero, but I think the dollar is going to come first. And I think the next, it's not going to go in a straight line, and they will take turns down to the bottom. But I think the dollar will start that fall, or the next fall is already in a long-term downtrend, as I said. But then, of course, all the other currencies will follow. So, it's a very interesting time. But I just see, we are going to have as I read the world, because I've always been interested in risk, trying to understand the downside, trying to understand, where the next event is going to happen, but you don't actually have to forecast anymore what's going to happen, because you know that there are risks of a magnitude that has never ever existed in the world before, in every single country in the world, whether that's Japan, which is bankrupt, whether it's China, which has a debt which is now unsustainable, or whether it's Europe, as we just talked about, which is going to, at some point, in my view, fall apart. And I hope that the EU and the way the EU functions now will fall apart, because it's bad for Europe. I do believe in free trade and I believe in cooperation, but not in a political elite sitting and controlling all of Europe for their own pleasure. And then the US, of course, which is the biggest indebted country in the world, and is running bigger deficits, and the debt there will continue to double every 8 years, in my view, just like it has in the last 30, 40 years, which means that, we will have, Trump took over about 20 trillion debt. I think 8 years after, whether, he probably won't be there in 8 years, but after his first 4 years and another 4 years, that the US debt will have doubled. So that, we're in an incredible mess, and the world the world will suffer because of as an artificial system that's built up that is unsustainable.
You talked about the dollar racing to the bottom. I mean, Trump, I've said this long ago, that he got all this oil drilling. We now are an exporter of oil, the U.S. We would have been in a depression if it wasn't for Trump. I mean, Hillary would have, her goal was to put everybody in a FEMA camp and sell, Alaska and Hawaii, or, well, except for one island for Obama. I joke, but I mean, that's what they were going to do. They were going to destroy America. You say that everybody's currency will end up going to zero. What happens when that happens? You're forecasting some sort of new currency, or currencies, plural? Or is that what you're forecasting? We're going to need a new dollar. We're going to need a new euro, a new lira, a new pound sterling. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there will be new currency systems around the world. I'm not, everybody talk, or some people talk about, that there will be a new reserve currency with drawing rights, and it's still, I'm sure, and the US will still try to dominate the currency scene. I don't think they will succeed, because I think in the next round, China and Russia and other countries, they will set up their own currency system. And of course, as we know, gradually the petrodollar will disappear, because all these countries will start paying in their local currency. So I think there will be many currencies. I don't want to see a world currency. I don't want to see, a major currency or a gold-backed currency. I don't believe in that. And I don't actually believe in a gold-backed currency either, because a gold-backed currency means an artificial system, again, where governments are part of it and control it. And we know that every time in history where governments have been involved, the currency has failed, because, as we know, there is no currency in history that has survived.
Except gold and silver.
Yeah, except for gold. But gold, I'm a great believer, rather than having a gold backing a system, because even all the gold-backed systems have not survived, because in the end, the country that has a gold backing, reaches its peak, and then the economy is living about its means. So then they have to start printing money, and then the gold backing is taken away, and it fails. In my view, gold will only reach its true value once it's detached from all currencies. And we have, there's a system called free gold, which is that gold is not linked to any currency, has no debt attached to it, and is freely traded. And that's the last thing you can say about gold today being freely traded, because gold is it's the most artificial market in the world. There are the daily trading on the LBMA of the bullion banks, the daily trading of paper gold is 16 times annual mine production, the daily trading.
Wow.
And that tells you something about, the settlement is lower, but the gross trading is 16 times. And the annual trading on the LBMA is 70 times, the gross trading I'm saying about 70 times all the gold in the world that has ever been mined. So, this is a real casino. The LBMA is a real casino. And this is why the gold price, and of course, so compared to the LBMA, COMEX is very small. The real paper trading is between the LBMA banks, and that has to fail, and it will fail, of course, because all these paper claims that can never be settled. Once gold breaks free, we will have then you will have the free gold I talk about, because then the paper market is not going to function, and then you will see a gold price being multiples of what it is today, because gold is only where it is right now because of this artificial trading.
You said it's the LVMA trades 70 times all the gold that's ever been mined in the world
Annually, yes,
annually.
annually.
Well, then,
Yeah.
would it be safe to say? I mean, I'm just doing simple math here because I'm a simple guy. Would it be safe to say that the real price of gold is 70 times what, $1,250 or whatever it is right now?
So,
What's the price of gold should it be based on those metrics? I guess is the question to you.
well, yeah, I probably that's probably too simple to say that, but all I would say is, rather than making a specific forecast, is that gold will be multiples of the current price once it is free from the paper market, and from an artificial paper market that has nothing to do with the price of gold, because the price of gold is now settled in a casino.
What's it take to break loose from that? What's it take to finally? We've been talking about that for years, about how it's all artificial and nobody goes to jail. Although they do get caught doing it and they get convicted of it, so we know it's absolute fact. I mean, didn't Deutsche Bank or some other bank just recently get caught again? Somebody was telling me that they've been caught multiple times just in the last not too long. They've been pleading guilty to it and getting the fine. I mean, right? I mean, that's a fact now. That's not
Yeah,
a.
but I agree with you, but sadly, that's nothing. Every time some banker, some trader has done something, have we ever seen a top guy going to jail? Have we ever seen, the board being thrown out and going to jail? No. What they do is they get hold of a little guy who wasn't really the one who was responsible, because the board is, of course, responsible. But the board has never taken responsibility in any organization, whether it's the COMEX or the banks or LBMA banks, any of this. So that is not the way we're going to break that system, by putting a little guy into jail. It's only going to be broken by the sheer weight of the paper. And when the people start worried, when the system starts coming down, when markets start coming down and failing, stock markets, bond markets, etc., then it will also get, obviously, to the gold market, and people will start getting nervous about the fact that they have massive claims on paper gold, but are they going to get delivery? And once people start asking for delivery, then the system will fail, of course, because there is no gold. I mean, initially they will try to settle it in money, etc., but in the end, all of these exchanges will fail, or governments and central banks will have to print so much money that the money is debased and worthless anyway. That's the way I think the system will crash, not by putting some little gut trader in jail. So
How close are we to that? I mean, we just described. We started this interview off with the UK's a mess, and Theresa May is doing her imitation of Neville Chamberlain, or worse. Italy is a mess. They're bankrupt. They're going backwards. Germany is a mess. I mean, they have that giant boil of Deutsche Bank with 40, trillion in derivatives, which is 10 times the German economy. And they're not going to let it go under, which is going to be a big cost. I mean, the whole thing's a mess. I mean, just Europe. We're just talking about Europe, let alone the giant colossal, mess that the U.S. is at 421 additional $1 trillion that they found in DOD and HUD. I mean, that Washington Post wants to write off and say, oh, it's just plugs. Oh, it all cancels each other out, which is total garbage, total lie to the people. So how close are
What
we?
you're saying, what you're seeing now, Greg, you're right. And you know what the politicians are doing now? And Theresa May is the best example of that. They are confusing activity with action. These politicians are just running around, posing, pretending, but they're not achieving anything. And they're not achieving anything because the world is in a mess. And therefore, this is what we're seeing is the beginning of the decline of the Western world economy, which means the whole world economy. So coming back to how you started that, you said, how long is it going to take? Well, I've had a long life and I had a lot of experience, and I've learned that forecasting is a mug's game, and there's no use putting a time period on that's going to happen tomorrow or next year or next year. The trend is clear. We know that the world economy is in a mess. It's going to decline. It's going to be, in my view, it's going to be a rapid decline. And with it goes, stock markets, bond markets, as I said before, and currency markets, and gold will reflect all of that, and currencies will be totally debased. So, if you want me to give a time frame, I would say
have at it.
3 to 7 years. I would say it's going to happen within that. So by 2025, I think we will have seen this, and I think it could happen faster. I think it could happen a lot faster. But I think that is let's say a credible time frame in my view.
But that's not going to be a lovely roses and what this is more of what we see right now. I mean, a lot of consternation. I mean, somebody could zig when they should have zagged, and the whole thing could come down, couldn't it? I mean, it's so. I mean, you're a guy that looks at risk, right? And we are at a point now where any wrong move. I mean, this stupid, Huawei or Huawei, CFO, they're arresting now Canadians in China. That's what we want to do business with. A totalitarian government, communist government who's put a dictator in for life. Yeah, China's the model that the world wants to go after. But they're threatening Canada. They're threatening the U.S. They're threatening. I mean, there's any number of pimples, boils could pop and create a mess here in the world. Could it not? Could it? Or am I wrong?
Absolutely, you're right. This is what's happening now. These failed trade talks and the tariffs and you take the sanctions of Iran, you take the control of the money that has started with the Americans after Switzerland, after they attacked these American bank accounts held in Switzerland, and you're right. We are seeing so many examples, and then these arrests you're talking about. We're seeing so many examples of this now around the world, and you don't need a lot. You might only need another few snowflakes to trigger this avalanche that could, come. It could come next month, or it could come in 3 months' time, because the system, as I said, it's a fake system I count to quadrillions of money. If you add debt and unfunded liabilities, and if you add the risks of derivatives, you come up to 2 trillion or 2 quadrillion today of debt and liabilities. And there isn't, and that's, remember that's 2 trillion against
2 quadrillion.
2 quadrillion, excuse me. 2
quadrillion. A quadrillion, a trillion is 1,000 billion. Wait a minute, let me get this right. A billion is 1,000 million. A trillion is 1,000 billion. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. So there's 2,000 trillion in a mess in the world. Am I getting that right?
So a trillion, is 1,000 billion. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. Yeah, you're right.
A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. So you're talking about 2 quadrillion, 2,000 trillion against a global GDP of what, 70 trillion?
70 trillion, yeah.
What could go wrong?
So you're talking about 30 times global GDP. So, as you say, what can go wrong? You don't need much to go wrong, and it will happen, Greg. It will happen. they have no remedy anymore. What happened 2007-9, as I've said many times, well, that was a rehearsal. The real thing is coming now in the next few years, and there's no money printing will ever stop it. They will try, but it will fail. It will totally fail, and that's why you will get in my view, you will get the hyperinflation, the depressionary hyperinflation, and when that fails, you will get the depressionary deflation or implosion of the system, and then all values will just shrink to very low numbers, together with the debt. Of course, all assets and debt will together shrink. So that's the longer term play, and it's not, as you mentioned before, it's not going to be nice for the world. It'll be horrible for the world. But yes, because of the artificial control by central banks, by governments of the system, the cycles become 10 times or 100 times bigger than they would have been by natural forces. And therefore, we've had now 100 years of excesses in the world and artificial wealth creation, and we will now have a very long period, or in coming years, a very long period of the opposite, which will be a lot, wealth will disappear, people will be having, a lot of people will suffer, and there will be, sadly, there will be famine, there will be misery, etc. But that's, the world has gone through it before. I think this will be bigger than before, than it ever has been. But, the world has always survived. It will survive this one too. But there'll be a lot of suffering when this implodes.
Thus brings us to your clients that vault gold in secret locations with you on 2 continents. And I've had people write me and say, how much should I buy? How much? I tell people, I like it the way it comes out of the ground, but I can't give you advice. 10 to 1, 10 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold. Other people say, how much gold should I have? And I quote you. And you told me an interview or 2 ago, and I was shocked when you said this. You said, my clients have at least 20% of their net worth in gold. Some 50% of their net worth in gold. What are your clients saying against this worsening backdrop? I mean, every time I have you on, it's not better, it's worse, it's significantly worse. What are your clients are saying to you now?
Well, Greg, what you have to understand is that our clients are wealth preservation clients. They're not the people who have made money every day on stocks going up, or certainly not in the last few years, and stocks going up or bonds going up. They might have made money on that before, or they might have sold a company or whatever. But these are people who see the risks in the world, and therefore they have, have to remember that there's only 0.5% of world financial assets into gold. So it's a very small percentage, and we reach the people who are worried about the world. But the average person has no interest in gold whatsoever, and I don't see that today. I don't see that changing. I don't see the normal people who are into all these bubble markets. The fear hasn't started yet, but it will do, and then there will be a rush into gold and silver. So yeah, of course our clients, the ones who still have who have liquidity, who are not fully invested in gold, they are increasing their positions definitely. I tell people that they should have as much gold that they feel comfortable with. In my view, 25% is the minimum. Personally, I wouldn't have any major assets in the bank because I don't think the banking system will survive. And if it survives, it will be or certainly not in its present form. There will be bail-ins. People will lose the money they have in the bank, and if they have cash, that will be debased to an extent that is not going to have much value. Stocks will also, of course, in my view, is that stocks, certainly in relation to gold, will go down by 95% at least. The stock market went down 90% in 1929 to 32, and that was, and I'm saying, it's at least 90% against gold, but even on its own, it could go down that much. Stock markets, the same with bond and property markets. So there will be the most massive wealth destruction ever. I have to add again, I'm not a pessimist. I'm not a prophet of doom and gloom. It might sound like it. All I'm doing is looking at the risks, and trying to help a few people to protect against that risk. I've never been a gold bug. Gold is only the consequence of my concerns about the risks in the world, and it's the best way of protecting yourself against it. Property has sometimes been a very good protection, and real estate, but today that's a bubble market too. So there's nothing wrong holding some real estate, but certainly don't, if you own your own house or a farm, etc. But don't do it leveraged, because that's going to kill people. I think people now should be thinking of increasing their protection, because I wouldn't hold major amounts of cash in the bank. I think that's high risk. It's a difficult. Most people cannot. Most people will not accept this reasoning. Most people will, call me a nutcase, and that's fine.
Wait, hold on. No. You got to stop there. No, I don't interview nutty people. What you talked about was stuff that's actually happening. It's not what you think. This is what's happening, folks. Theresa May is going around Europe. That she's doing that. Italy is a basket case. Germany does have Deutsche Bank, that wart that's buried to explode with pus everywhere. It's $8.50. Their economy is contracting in Germany. The America is a mess with tons of debt. There is all this debt in the world. It's not getting better. They're not shrinking any debt. That's for damn sure. So please don't call yourself a nutcase. You're not a nutcase.
No, but you have to remember that, as I said, just of investors, and never mind other people, because most people are not investors in the world. Most people have no money; they have just debt. Of investors, only less than 0.5% is invested into gold. That means that all the others, believe that what people like myself are saying, is ridiculous. They think that they're going to be saved, as always, by governments and central banks. I think this time they'll be wrong. So this is why I'm saying that a lot of people think that the people who are preaching I'm not preaching anything. I'm just I'm doing a risk analysis, and coming, as you say, to the conclusion that the risk is higher than ever in history. And when risk is high, you got to protect yourself against it. It's very simple in my time. And then you go back and enjoy your life. There's no use worrying about. You can only do as much as as we try to do for a few people, and then you live your life. It's going to be. Remember, when gold goes up the way I think it will do, then life is not going to be as enjoyable as it is today. At least you have some protection then against the financial side, but the human side will still be horrible.
Egon von Greyerz, you have your website, which is goldswitzerland.com. There's free information on there. I think you also have a Matterhorn Asset Management website too. But you write stuff. You have free information on there. You vault gold for people. I think you sell gold as well. It's goldswitzerland.com. I'll put the links up to goldswitzerland.com. The company, Matterhorn Asset Management. The man, Egon von Greyerz. Egon, thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com from Europe.
Greg, it's a pleasure to speak to you always, and you produce some wonderful interviews, and thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Well, my interviews are only good as the people, and you're an ace, you're a hitter, you're a pro, and I appreciate you coming on. And I know the news isn't good, but people have to be woken up to it. This is what they're telling you in the mainstream press is a huge lie at best. But anyway, thank you, Egon, for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.